Hi everybody, it's Jackie Smurden and here I am in Dunnock Studio and it's December, in case you haven't noticed the little tree behind me. Today I thought we'd have a quick look at watercolour palettes. Now most of you will already be using a palette and so that's absolutely fine, you might want to skip this video. I'm not going to show you every palette on the market, not by any means. I thought I'd just run through a few that I've got here in case you're still a little bit undecided, not quite sure what the best palette is. Well, I can tell you that straight away, the best palette is the one that suits you. So I'll show you some ideas and you can decide whether or not you want to take them further. And if you'd like to like or subscribe to my channel, that would be greatly appreciated. If you find this information useful, that will help my channel to grow so I can share my videos with more people. So palettes, what do my palettes normally look like? So that's one of my palettes. This is literally how they come out of a workshop or how I finish when I use them. So I'm not going to clean them all up because actually this palette, which I think was used by a learner, is actually relatively clean, and I mean in the sense that the colours aren't muddied up. So there's a nice yellowy, that's the yellow they were using, the greens hopped over. You'll find that with some palettes when they're not very deep here, the colour hops over into the next well. But if you add yellow and green together, you get a yellow-green, so that's not a problem. So what I thought I'd show you first is this palette has had a lot of use. So if I clean, say this one, which is the muddiest one I can see, and for that I'm using the terrible baby wipes. Now I'm trying this with my phone as a camera today, so just bear with me on the wobbles. And there we go. That's nice and clean. Now, if I go straight in on that, I'm going to obviously have whatever's left over from this on that surface there. So I'm going to give that a chance to dry. So here's a brand new palette I've just bought, which is made of the same stuff as this. It's plastic. You can like an acrylic, isn't it? So what I thought I'd show you is what happens when, let's get some burnt sienna, which is my favourite colour. This is a company, if you're in the UK, Jackman's, who I sought at Patchins for the last 2 years. They do lovely paints and they're based here in the UK. So Jackman's Art Materials. No, they haven't paid me to say that, but I just like the fact that they're the British company. And this one is an ultramarine blue. Oh, and this one, let's have a look. Schminky. So not a UK based company, but a very good brand name. So I've just got two colours in there. I've put them on the side of this particular palette. It's got some side wells that are quite big, so although they've got lots of room, I wouldn't be able to fit as many colours in as I can with that one. So what I wanted to show you is if I'm mixing up a colour onto a brand new palette. Now it's going to be hard for you to see that. The reason I've picked these colours is that hopefully you'll be able to see, but this palette is beading up because it's a brand new palette. If I add colour to it, this blue being the obvious one, can you see how it keeps shrinking back to the middle? See that? So it's really quite hard to spread it out. So there we go, there's a mixture on there. It's a brand new acrylic palette. There's lots of ways of stopping that happening. Sort of giving it a good wash up with dishwash soap and like a slightly abrasive scour or something like that will just take off that shine. However, let's try the one I cleaned up earlier. Pop it next to that, and then if I try and mix it on there, Is it any better? Well, it's spreading out a lot more. That one keeps going back in. This one I can spread out quite a long way. So with use, palettes improve if they're made of acrylic. Okay, so that's the first thing to pick up from this session is most people end up with an acrylic palette because it's cheap and cheerful, easy to get hold of, lightweight, and makes a lot of sense when you're starting out. So don't be too worried if you can't get your paint to cover up that palette because it keeps disappearing back into the middle. It just needs this area to be seasoned, if you like a good cooking pot. It will come with time, but you can speed the process up if you like, but it's up to you, absolutely up to you. So I mentioned before about seasoning a palette, and seasoning a palette can just be as simple as using it, and over time washing it up and putting paint on and off will make this shiny, difficult to see your paint surface disappear. But there are other ways of dealing with this. So some of you might have come across a magic eraser, which is bought from art shops. It's quite an abrasive sponge, but apparently you can buy it in the cleaning aisle of most supermarkets. So it's got a really weird texture, it makes a strange noise. So if you pop that into some completely clean water, so we've got a palette here, we've got a slightly different palette. Actually, I'll do these here because, or maybe these two in the middle, because these are flat and these are slightly sloped. So this one, I'm going to just gently work over that with this magic eraser, like so. So it's slightly abrasive. It should take off some of the surface shine. Right, and then I'll just quickly give that a little dry. So that's the magic eraser. And then another one is baking powder, which for all of you who are certain age and above will remember, and to be fair, lots of young people now will remember as being a very good cleaning agent. Used to soak the oven in powder, not necessarily baking powder, because bicarb of soda, etc., which is in baking powder. Turning this into a science lesson. Here we go. Tick off your science for this week. So I'm not using anything else apart from my fingers here because it is slightly abrasive, and I want to give the product a chance to show me what it can do. There we go, slightly drier now, rather than using another sponge or something on top. So I've massaged that all over there. I'm just going to use the towel now to try and get that out as cleanly as possible. There we go. I love doing these sort of experiments. I used to work in the NHS. I was always interested in biology, and a long time ago at school I did hospital science and physiology of exercise. Oh my goodness, all those things my brain used to be able to cope with. Now I just use it in my art, which is a lot more relaxing. So it's a little slightly messy version of what I've done before. So yes, baking powder or any sort of soda, slightly more messy. So I've done one here, one here. That one's still got a little bit of baking powder in it. Probably going to have a fizz later. That would be interesting painting experience, wouldn't it? Let it fizz, see what that does to your paints. Might try that. Bicarb of soda and watercolour, see what happens. So the one at the top has nothing done. The one here has got a magic eraser, and this one has got the baking powder. So I'm just going to grab some paint now. So into each one I'm going to put a few drops of water. Just drag that down in case my camera hasn't lined up properly. So they've all beaded up pretty much the same. It's going to be one of those experiments that doesn't work, isn't it? So here goes some colour. into the well that has had nothing done to it. So it's definitely sticking into one area quite happily. It doesn't really want to go anywhere else. So what happens with the magic eraser area? Spreads out slightly better, doesn't it? A little bit wider. What about this one with a baking powder? Yeah, that spread out actually the best of all of them. Still is pooling up. Let's go back into all of these. And that one, and that one. So this one at the end, which has had no treatment, is definitely pooling back into a sort of a ball the most. This one with the magic eraser is spreading out slightly more. And this one with the baking powder is sort of in the middle, I would say. So it's definitely an improvement from nothing to having a little bit of abrasive sponge, and somewhere there we've got a little bit of abrasion with the baking powder. So anything that will give the surface a little bit of a sort of a rough polish is going to help stop this. And although this isn't a problem in itself, you can still paint perfectly well. This is much, in appearance, much darker than this and this because it's balled up, so there's less light reflecting from the white palette below. So I can't see the colour in that one as well as I can see in these two. It's exactly the same colour in all of them. So good experiment. So here I have bought a Fusion 18 watercolour palette. This is made in Korea. I've never heard of them before, but I have seen this palette being used by another artist. So I thought I do a lot of travelling to paint, and I quite like the idea of this one. So it's an acrylic palette again, but you can see here it's got a seal all the way around it. So theoretically, if I wipe it out and I do that and click, should be able to take it home in my bag without everything leaking out. Now the one I showed you before actually folded over, but it's not very leak proof. So this one I thought is worth a try. So let's see how something that's quite a lot more expensive than the previous acrylic palettes actually behaves, because this one has got a inner liner that you take out to clean it. So it's never going to stay that clean, is it? Let's be honest. But let's just see how this performs. If I pick up some of this blue that we had on the brand new acrylic palette here, this is also brand new, I've never used it. What happens if I throw the paint onto this amazingly expensive surface? Well, that's no different, is it? It's travelling over into the middle of that area. So there we go. I was hoping for better things than that, but no, it's not to be. Does it travel a bit further? No, it doesn't. It goes back to the middle. This is why it's good to try these things out with you, because then you won't buy this palette thinking it's going to be any better than this cheap one here. Let's see what this side does. Pretty much as expected. In fact, that side is actually worse than this cheap one here. It really isn't sitting anyway. Now I'm not worried about this because these palettes will season and become very usable, and it really doesn't matter. It's just sometimes quite difficult to get your colours to actually spread out so you can see what you're mixing if they keep pooling together in the middle. It's almost like there's a magnet under there. It's quite fascinating. So yes, so that for the extra money that I paid is very good as a portable palette, I would say. Yes, I'll let you know how that goes when I go to an art group. But is it any better for actually spreading the paint out? No, it's not. This is a cheap and cheerful one, and this one isn't. But they're both very similar in that sense. So if you don't like this effect, what can you do? Well, it depends how you like to paint. A lot of people like to paint with a big wide open palette, and then they mix the colours as they go. So if I was going to pick up another colour which I've got here, which is the burnt sienna, pop it on my palette here. Let's see what happens, if I can get enough over there for you to actually see it. Now again, it's very difficult to get that to pull over to here and that to pull over to there, but then I can just about get it to mix on the palette to make a grey, because these are opposite on the colour wheel. You've got a red orange and a blue, almost blue violet there, which is going round. So you get a browny grey at the moment. I could pull more blue into that to make it bluer. So you get the idea. But if you're finding it difficult, you might want to have separate wells. I've shown you this one before, which is a daisy palette, flower palette, whatever you want to call it. So you literally would mix up your colours into each area, make a nice big puddle of them. So if I pick up the actual paints, throw it in there, add some clean water, like so, make a nice big puddle. Then instead of mixing on here, I could mix on my paper, for instance. So let's just park that on there, give this brush a quick wash, pick up this burnt sienna that I've got here. So let's make a nice big puddle of that, add some more water to that, like so. So there we go, we've got two really nice big, well, biggish puddles. I'm not going too mad. So I've got puddles of colour everywhere. So if you like mixing on the paper, this style of palette works quite well. If you don't, you like to mix on a flat area, then the easiest option is a ceramic plate, which honestly is a completely different ball game. Look at that. Let's just put a little bit of water on there, a little bit of paint, and look how far that's spreading out. It's just completely different. Obviously this plate is seasoned, it's been through a wash a few times, but it's ceramic and it's very, very different. And look at the difference of how far that blob there and how far this has gone. I cannot get that to do that the same way. It's just bobbling up. This one I can get it quite thin, so I could mix on the plate really well. But if you don't like mixing on the plate, you much rather mix like this, then there is an option available in shops. This is an egg holder. Did I spend money on this? No, I didn't. This was from a charity thrift shop, whatever you call it in your part of the world. It's an egg holder, it's ceramic. It's perfect for puddles of paint like this. So you can mix up your puddles prior to you popping them on the painting. You can make nice big puddles of paint, keep them all beautifully separate without the hassle of them whizzing across the page somewhere else. Oh, the palette, sorry. There we go. Get beautiful palettes of paint that you then don't mix in here. Well, you could do. You could mix them together there if you wanted to. But it's a really nice way of keeping your colours separate, where the plate idea, you could mix on the plate. So your blue would come in, running out of space now. Your blue would come in on the plate, and instead of putting them onto the paper separate, you'd perhaps prefer to mix them on the plate first. And there's a nice grey appearing there. And then you can keep your blue separate and your red separate, because they're staying on their side of the plate. It does move, obviously. I really like these. It's for an egg holder, so keep your eye out for one of those for virtually no money at all. Help a charity out if you can. So that's a really good option. So there's some of my ideas for palettes you might like to look at. It is really about what they're made of. Some people use glass palettes, some people prefer the ceramics. That this is the cheapest option, a white plate, which you can either pick up for virtually nothing if it's it's lost the rest of its set, but even a brand new plate is not expensive. So you get a lot more use out of those. So actually I have several learners who prefer a plate to anything else. So you can spend money on lovely super duper palettes, etc. The travel palettes, etc., tend to be, I've shown you already, acrylic or plastic, whichever way you look at it. But yeah, whatever you think would suit you, try and find it and have a go. But none of this matters really, does it? It's about what you do when you put it on the page. So we've got this palette that I used earlier. So I could do the same thing with all of this, give it a little abrasive rub down, which will help the colours to stop balling. But there is another nifty trick with this one. If you remember, there has a tray that pulls out, which technically makes it easier to clean. So there is another way you could use this one. You get an extra mixing area, which extends your palette. Two, it's quite nice to be able to take it apart and move it to clean it. Just get that out of the way. But here's another option. So you've got a photo and you want to match up your colours. So we've got a little bit of a reflection there, haven't we? Let's try and get away from that if we can. So I'm trying to match up my greens. This green has just naughtily squeezed itself into that green, which is not what I wanted at all. Let me just make a... This is the trouble with palettes that don't have reels between them, as you can't get them apart. It's much harder for you to see this, I know. So say on here I wanted to match the tone of the grass with the photograph. So you can see that this one is way too light, and although you can't see it as well as I can, that particular green is also way too warm and summery and yellowy. And then this green on the bottom is better, but the tone, if you squint, if you can actually see that at all. If I put it over the church, you can see it a bit better. I can see through it, but when I put it over the grass, it's still a bit too light. The value is too light. But if I pull this one over, which has got more blue added to it, if I squint through that, I can see that the tone, the value of that green is the best match for this grass on the bottom. The colour isn't far off either. I'm not a painter who actually worries about colour matching, especially to a photograph. It's more about paint what you feel for me. But what a good piece of kit. If you are into colour matching and you want to get those colours as close as possible, how about that? A transparent palette that you can match the colour before you put it onto your paper. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I don't have every palette in the universe in my studio, so I had to ask my granddaughter to share hers, and this is a metal palette, and it's actually got some nice watercolour pigments in solid pans in there. Very, very nice. And you can see she's mixing it onto the metal lid, which does behave a bit like ceramic. So lots of people like to use metal plates, sort of camping type things. So that's just another option for you. If you've got a child, you know, maybe they've got a palette you could try out. So I hope you enjoyed that little foray into palettes and the different sorts of palettes. So if I'm doing a big painting wet in wet, I really do like this egg box idea. Ceramic egg box, if you can get hold of one. The white plate comes a close second, but the acrylic plastic palettes are really, really good. Inexpensive, easy to transport, and I'm all about transport. Has to be easy, and like a lot of people, I suffer from a bad back, so it's no good me going carrying a ceramic palette around with me. So you have to be sensible about these things. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you're interested in what I do, please have a look at my website, which is there, dunnockstudio.uk. And you can, if you're in the UK or in Norfolk and you'd like a lesson, please get in touch. I do bigger workshops as well at our local village hall. If you're not and you've enjoyed this and enjoyed painting along, then please give me a like, subscribe, even better a comment would be great. and I'd love to hear from you. So take care and happy painting, everybody. I hope you have a really good time enjoying a 2-colour painting and exploring the palettes you've got. Remember, there's no right or wrong palette. The palette that works is the one that works for you. Take care. Bye for now.